some water now. Music in relation to identity, my mind going past the wind. You know it's not any tendency of mine to quit while I'm in between the lines. I just twist it and keep on rhyming. Pass it to anybody trying to find the timing. It's history inside everything I'm finding. Identity, visions of the past aligning. And I keep on shining past the rhyme while the beat unlining, relying. Load the whole show. Now it's about to start again. Oh, I think that was good, right?
That was good.
All right, welcome to Vine Tree Radio. This is Wesley here chilling with
Mowdy Wowie. How's it going? We got a special guest.
Daisy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
We got a special today. We have Daisy sitting with us because we want to talk about a lot of different topics that we've already touched on, but mostly relating to identity, culture, and music and how they all relate together. This is a project that me and Daisy and Mauricio have been kind of collaborating on to bring to everybody. It's going to be a great talk, and I hope to share some insight on these topics and how they kind of help us showcase our unique voice within that.
I'm excited. This is gonna be a fun one. So where do we want to start with this?
I think we're probably just gonna start with a little bit of background from Daisy. I know me and Daisy both go to Cal State Monterey, but I also want to get a little bit of info on who she is, how we ended up, in this class, meeting each other, and so on. So
Yes. So first of all, thank you for creating this space and for inviting me on. I know that I had reached out to you when I saw your proposal that was submitted to Dr. Wang. And I was kind of intrigued by it because I feel like I could relate to it a lot in terms of you're talking about music and culture and identity. So I am originally from Monterey County. I was born and raised in Salinas, more specifically East Salinas. So if you're familiar with the area, that probably serves as a unique identifier. To a lot of people, there's like a negative connotation associated to that. But to me, that's home. It always has been, and it probably always will be. I'm a first generation Mexican, so I come from a pretty big family, and I'm the youngest of the bunch. So I grew up in a fairly traditional, but oftentimes I think progressive Mexican household, but traditional nonetheless. And I feel like that culture really helped to shape me into the person that I am and I'm turning out to be, and like the place that I find myself in today. So yeah, especially in college, like learning a little bit more about that culture and like where I came from really, really helped shape me into learning a little bit more about myself and knowing who I was and like even like my place in society a little bit, having a better understanding of that and understanding the complexities of being first generation and being Mexican and being a woman. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
That's interesting. I like to hear that too, because I'm also a first generation student, and while I'm not from Salinas, I'm familiar with the area from living and going to school out there. And for me, I feel like I experienced a lot of coming of age, as you would say, like in those times when I went to college over there, and some of it over here, because I in my background, I lived in a lot of different places, like Van Nuys first, and then I lived in Lancaster, and then here where I live now, Santa Clarita. But I feel like all that was within somewhat the Southern California region. So moving up north, I feel like the culture even there, as far as music and how people cultivate their identities even, was different. And I feel like I kind of fed off of that and learned a little bit from that in some sense, maybe just timely wise of like the age I was and what I was doing at the time, like from being there at college. I know Mauricio probably has had a lot of experiences like that of where you happen to be at a particular time where you were learning the most because you were maybe like 18 or 19 or whatever you were at when you were learning, but you were here at this school or you were here.
Definitely. I had I grew up here in Santa Clarita, California, and from there, I went to school in New York initially, and that was that was a whole different it was just a whole different vibe. I mean, East Coast, West Coast. I mean, one's by the beach while the other one is like surrounded by the water and by the beach. It's like a city vibe, whole different thing. So a whole different, whilst like both are like popular culture, they both have their own culture. You know what I mean? They're very unique, and so definitely different vibes, different things that I was able to learn from living somewhere else and seeing, how they vibe.
He says, anything in particular that you would say, like, your first time, like, riding to the... Actually, this is different for me. I know I would say, like, driving the car over there, but you probably taking the subway to, like, a job or to an interview or something. You probably had your first moment of learning with that. I know for me, I had one of those moments. You can get into it right now, too. But I know I'm even saying that. I realized I never used the bus to travel much until I was in Monterey. And that did shape a lot of who I was as far as like even writing sense or whatever, like in school or commute sense. It shapes a lot of who you become, I guess.
Interesting. For me personally, like, I agree. The subway was a beast on its own to figure out, but I feel like I picked it up pretty quick because for me, I was on the opposite end. As a young kid, I was taking the bus just because it's public transportation. It's cheap. You can get a lot of places with it. At least for me as a kid, and I needed it to get home from school sometimes, pretty often, not sometimes, like every day, type deal. So I would take the bus a lot in that sense, like the public bus, not even like the one with like the school kids, and I would take that like by myself. So when I went to New York, going in the subway, like the first time I went to New York when I was 14 with my mom, like at first she was trying to like kind of guide us around, being like, okay, we got to get over to this spot. How do we get over there? And I was like, here, let me take a look. And I was able to kind of pick it up quick and go with that. So the subways didn't scare me that much, but they were awesome. I loved them because it's a whole different environment over there. But I loved it there because I was able to think a lot. A lot of my times, like in these buses or trains and subways, and it's just a moment. It's almost like a sense of meditation. Like you can use it as a time to really reflect on what's going on at the moment, what you want to go on, reflecting on the past. It's just a moment to think. And a lot of times I would listen to music and think through the music and kind of reflect on that end. So it was going on this public transportation was always like a really reflective moment for me, and I always really enjoyed it, low-key.
I feel like you get the time to really be with yourself, which is important.
Very much so. Very much so.
For me, being in the Monterey area, I mean, I know, Wes, you kind of touched a little bit on that, how it exposed you a little bit to, I guess it's a change, you know what I mean? For you coming from all these different places. For me, it's kind of interesting because I've actually thought about, so Monterey County, so let's focus more on Salinas, I guess, because I am from Salinas. So Salinas is a predominantly Latino community. I would even go as far as saying it's a Mexican/Mexican American area, right? Like it's heavily populated by like first generation American. So it's interesting because when I think about the area, and how it shaped me, sometimes I don't know if this was just my experience, but sometimes I feel like there was like a lot of like negative shaping that happened, and that kind of confused me in the sense where I questioned my identity a lot more than one would think, because you'd think that being surrounded by a group of people that come from similar backgrounds, or that literally come from the same place that, like, say my parents did, or etc., that it would have kind of like helped me or felt like I belonged a little bit more. But I don't know if this was just like a Daisy experience, but it was kind of quite the opposite, because I there was almost like I feel like I'm treading lightly around what I'm going to say, because I don't want to come off the wrong way, but it was almost like this shame that came from my own people because of our identity. It was almost like a hate, which is strange. I don't know if I'm kind of getting off topic here, but just hearing you all speak about, like finding yourself, having time with yourself. Like I never really left the area. So I feel like that I was always kind of around the same people. And I feel like in growing up, it really affected me, and how I ended up seeing myself and learning a little bit more about myself. And it wasn't until college, to going to CSUMB, that I actually was able to like look at it from a different lens and like maybe appreciate my background a little bit more. So it's kind of interesting.
I understand where you're coming from. Maybe you're suggesting possibly like that your identity can possibly be limited in those spaces like you're describing, because they're not really embracing that about yourself. Like it's not like you almost describing it as, and I understand that, because sometimes, a lot of times where people are from in their hometowns, for me, I look at that a little different, my experience, because it's like not where I'm from, but I experienced a lot of that, and I'm pretty sure Mauricio hasn't. Where you're from originally, sometimes it doesn't get looked upon, I guess, the finding or discovering of like who you want to be, because it doesn't get looked at in a fond light sometimes, because I feel it's different than what everybody else may be doing, or like, you know what I mean? Like everyone's path is individual, so therefore, like as you're kind of finding that, some people don't know, like, and personally maybe like how to accept it, and I feel like that makes us a lot of the struggles with, I guess, like cultivating your identity. And I think maybe like even music could help people with that, because you know how music in some sense speaks to people. It's like, oh, like they're saying like speaking to me, they're saying something that like no one else is saying, or like, but it,
For sure.
yeah. And in those instances, it's kind of like that, because you might look around and be like, oh, I don't see anybody that's resonating with the way I feel, but like this song resonates with what my identity is kind of becoming, like in the moment, you know.
Yeah, and it gets you through those times too. Yeah.
No, it's very interesting. I think it's interesting also the point that you brought up with identifying with like where you grew up, especially because, and I understand it very much so, like for in your case, because you've moved around a lot, right? Like you've been, I mean, within the same kind of general area, but like there's been a lot of,
yeah, definitely at pivotal times in my, like, I guess, life period. Like I moved right before high school. Like I started my whole high school out here, but before that I did from all the way until third grade in the Valley in Van Nuys, and then between that in middle school, all that time, like from half of elementary and in between in Lancaster.
So when say someone were to ask you, not myself, because you know you're open enough to telling me this whole deal, but say someone just on the street asked you like, oh, where'd you grow up? What would you say? Do you give them the whole
I would say similar to what you said originally, that I've lived in a lot of different places. I've moved around here, like California, like Southern California, the Valley, because I mean like Santa Clarita Valley and the Van Nuys are relatively close. I think the strangest part is that I moved way out and then went back in. I think that's the part that makes it a little bit worth saying. I lived in a few different places.
That's dope. I like that a lot. I like that response, because I think there's just so much to learn from everywhere that you can go. You know what I mean? Any place in the world you can learn something. So, yeah, you know, if you haven't grown up in multiple different spots, like you've been exposed to a lot of different influential things, like that's pretty cool in my opinion. And I think that's cool to like, even though like you say sometimes, or you were saying it can be kind of difficult to kind of like associate with a spot necessarily of growing up, that doesn't matter as much, because what matters is like how all those little spots shaped you. Because I feel like that's what people really are trying to take away when they ask you like where you're from, right? They're trying to make an association of like, do I know where you're from? And if I do, it's sad, but a lot of people kind of jump to a conclusion of like, oh, let me make an assumption of you based on where you're from, and
Correct.
You know, which is kind of shitty. So I think your response is even cooler, where you say, it doesn't matter. Like I've lived multiple places.
It leans towards kind of what we were saying. Like it leans towards the cultivation of your unique voice and unique identity, because in a certain sense, yeah, like you've been experienced to a lot of different unique voices and identities naturally, because everybody's different. Everybody's culture is different. So I guess the more different cultures you experience, you can kind of like cultivate yours in a way. And I think that's a lot of like, we can kind of all touch maybe our own experience with that, because that's kind of what the main idea of the final project and everything, as I'm learning about, is that how like we do help each other kind of like cultivate our identities to be almost like sharper and more finite in that way, because by experiencing all these different things, we're more able to be like, oh, well, I'm not just this, or we don't feel that necessarily as much shame from being like, oh, everybody right here is this one way and I'm this way. like I got that experience, like she was saying, when I went to CSUMB more so. I've had it at different colleges, but there I had it for a bigger degree, at least with the music and all different kinds of people I met. It was a lot more varied, at least in the types of careers and paths you could take. At least I saw. I was like, okay, it's a lot more open rather than just my own community, what I'm seeing.
I feel that. I feel that very much so. When I went to New York for the for school, like that opened my eyes immensely. I am thankful for the opportunity to have gone to NYU, which at the time they were proudly hailing themselves as the most diverse university, taking people from like all over the world for doing a whole bunch of different things. And it was cool because I genuinely got to hang out, like people on my dorm floor and my whole building, and were from all over the world for doing all different things. And so it was cool because I got experienced a whole bunch of different like that. Like I've traveled here and there to a couple places prior, and I've definitely learned a lot culturally from that. I'm super thankful for those opportunities every time I've been able to go and experience a new location. But in that time of when I was like kind of just not forced, but given the opportunity to sit down and really talk to and engage with a lot of people from all over the world, it was crazy to see similarities and differences and see how just everyone's different perspectives on a lot of different things. And it was so cool. It's so eye-opening. And then like moving to Santa Barbara afterwards, I went to Santa Barbara Community College, which also at the same time was hailing itself for having a lot of international students. And so that was like I constantly, like that was something that I'm grateful for through school and everywhere that I've gone, whether it be New York, Santa Barbara, here at home, COC, or LA Film School, UCLA. Like it's places that are constantly full, that focus on having people from everywhere, right? And each time that I get to go see these places and meet people from all over the place, like you get to it opens your eyes to all these things. You know what I mean? And it's amazing.
It's a whole new experience, I feel. And I mean, I think that is what college is about, like exposing you to such a different environment, and it's really it makes you grow. It really makes you grow as a person, and it helps you form yourself. And I really like how you guys, you two were talking about, like where you grew up, and Wes's, like you pointed out, Mauricio, Wes's, explanation of where he's from, and how it's like, he's not really, like, they don't really define where he grew up, doesn't really define him. It was just kind of like shaped him, So I feel like that's similarly, college is that way too, where it really helps you, like you said, it helps you see things in a new light. It makes you view things from a different lens, and it exposes you to so many things that you wouldn't be exposed to had you, I guess you could say, stayed home. And maybe that's kind of like my thing too, that I'm so close to home. But I am a non-traditional student too, so I feel like a lot of the people that I would have normally in school with, I didn't have the opportunity to do that. Like, had people that grew up with me say they decided to go to CSUMB, I didn't go to school with them, so it definitely did expose me to a different culture, which I'm appreciative of, because I kind of came to being my own person because I literally know nobody there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about that part of finding like our identity and like who we are, because I had similar experiences when it comes to, before I went to CSUMB, I also went to community college, and I went to CSUN, which is another Cal State University, and I had a similar experience where a lot of people from my high school and community college went to the same school at CSUN, and it was a commuter school. It was only about 30 minutes away, and I feel like a lot of what we were just talking about and what you just mentioned kind of adds to the point of why that is almost hindering sometimes of cultivating your identity, or even a part of the journey to make you see the other part as really needed. Because that, as much as it seems like a support system to be like, oh, this is right here, this is that close, I've had that same experience here where that was almost what messed me up within that, because I was not as much pushing the boundaries or looking at different things that I could possibly be. I was kind of just rooting more into myself and then being like, oh, I'm not where I want to be.
Mm-hmm. It can be very limiting in the sense.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I feel like I'd want to ask about what are your experiences with commuting, or Mauricio or Daisy, like with to school and stuff like that. And how was that a time, I guess, for you, and like character wise? Like, did it build you? Did it make you feel like, wow, I gotta look around for the parking spots a lot more? Like, this is a different kind of patience. Like,
So when I did community college, uh, I was obviously still commuting. There's a community college in my hometown. But so I like I said, I'm a non-traditional student. So when I did community college, I mean, I did experience that, like you're saying, where it's like everyone from your high school is kind of there. It kind of feels like high school all over again. So that was only for a few semesters because unfortunately I did have to take a step back from school. And, you know, a lot of things happened in that time. So that's kind of where I become a non-traditional student, right? But for me, it was the community college, like I'm going to say like the first semester or two, very much felt like just going through the motions, kind of like you're saying, where I'm kind of limiting myself. I'm like, I'm not really where I want to be, but I'm not really aiming for anything. And then after the fact, when I actually returned, and I don't know if it's because I was older and maybe I had like a different head on my shoulders or something, or I just saw things differently, but it really became kind of like a grind for me. Like, okay, I need to be somewhere else. So I need to do this quick. It wasn't until I actually went into CSUMB that the drives there, for example, actually became a time like for reflection for myself, sort of thing. And maybe that was because I was working full time. So there was like a lot of responsibilities that were like on my plate. And that I had to like, kind of like work through, but I really just took it as a time for like just more understanding myself, and you know, whether I was listening to a podcast or listening to like old music that I used to enjoy and that I used to listen to a lot more, maybe when I had a little bit more time on my hands. So yeah, it kind of took me back to being able to I guess kind of like a therapy for myself in that sense, where I could do music, I could do podcasts, or even catch up on like some art, because I feel like I used to be like more into music before, like when I was younger, and then I lost that ability because I had other things that I had to do, you know what I mean? Other things that I had to take care of. So I really took that time driving to CSUMB to be able to catch up on those things that like made me feel good, or like helped relax me, or that I actually enjoyed listening to, or that resonated with me in some form or another.
Very much so. I feel that. I feel that. For me, I'm a big walker. I'm a big fan of walking. I mean, on my normal day-to-day like routine, I walk in the morning and I walk at night, and I treat it like in the same way as like the commuting, you know, aspect of like meditation, right? But when I was in school from, you know, New York, I walked everywhere. I didn't have a car out there. I didn't, you know, I mean, I would take the subway, but for the most part, I didn't mind walking.
I remember hearing you talk about that, like little memories of walking different here and there.
Oh, I loved it. I mean, it was to the point where, like, when I first moved there, every night I would just go on a walk in kind of different directions just to get to better know this city where I was living. Because I was like, where am I? I mean, I'm across the world, and I don't really fully know, you know, this neighborhood and, you know, the surrounding neighborhoods. I need to learn up.
That's something, right? Like, the whole, like, your identity in that regard, like where I am, what I'm doing. I'm here in New York, but like how much that plays into your identity, like where you're at, how much you know where you're at, how much you know, like, oh, this street I can go here and there, because I know that plays a lot into your identity. I found, at least when I first moved to Monterey, because I've never lived on my own per se. I had roommates, but being there, it was definitely like that gave me more time, like we were all just speaking about, like that time to kind of reflect and listen to music. I think that aspect of having less know-how of the area, of like what to do, where to go, friends to see, family to see, really made me kind of sit in and focus in more a lot of times, and be just like, I don't know, I guess maybe, yeah, focus on who I want to be, or who I'm gonna be, because there wasn't as much time. And I think maybe in those moments you have that, but that's pretty interesting. I didn't think about it like that.
No, yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely just a reflection period, and like in those times, man, I miss it. Those, just thinking about it right now, it gets me nostalgic, you know, because it was fun. Like I loved like, cause as far as commute to school when I was in New York, I was lucky enough to live literally right across the street from like everything that I really needed to be at. So as far as like, you know, commuting to class, that was the best. Can you imagine waking up 5 minutes before class, throwing on like a shirt real quick, and then just running across the street, and then boom, you're in class.
See, I don't know if this is correct, but it's almost like a theory I hear people talk about, how like similar to cavemen or something, that when we were in that state, you know, we were learning a lot really fast, rapidly, because it was all new and stuff like, and similar to that. I'll probably look it up after this, and there's stuff I've heard about this, but I think that's kind of the experience I feel like we're talking about when you're in a new area. The muscle that works of like learning and figuring out the new stuff really kind of like amplifies things in a different way, as far as your who you are, your identity, the skills that help you cultivate your identity even.
I agree with you. I think it's because it's one of those things where like you have to consider more variables. You have to there's so much more things going on around you that it kind of shapes you more. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like those things where like if you walk on concrete, like it's gonna be on a flat surface, rather. Let's not say concrete. If you walk on a flat surface, like that's normal, right? But if you walk on sand, it's better for you, because all those little grooves are constantly making you like kind of adjust. You know what I mean? And so those little adjustments are good for your feet, from my understanding, from what I've heard. Like orthopedically, it's better for you, better for your posture and stuff like that. But basically what it means is those little things that make it harder, that there's a little bit more things going on. Instead of that flatness, all those little bumps, all those other things that are going on are shaping you better, so more so than the flat, you know, more so than what you're used to, just kind of like the same routine in the same area. So yeah, I do agree that like every time I've been given the opportunity to go somewhere new, in those, especially in like the first couple weeks to months when I'm in somewhere new, like that's when I learn the most about somewhere, because it's like it's the time to learn. You know what I mean?
And you're learning about yourself, because you're seeing what you would do in this scenario.
Exactly.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, like what you would do being surrounded by this different type of people, or what you would do having to go to school this many times and this much work. Like all that really does kind of, it's like putting yourself in somewhat of an experiment, I guess, of your choosing. Like
that's very true. That's a really good way to look at that.
I like that. I've never even thought of it that way. I feel like maybe we'll have to edit this part out, because I'm not sure if I'm taking this to a different way. But I'm just wondering, because hearing you guys speak about that, so the area where I grew up in, which I don't live there anymore, but where I literally grew up there from since I was born to age like 22, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a pretty walkable area, but it wasn't necessarily the safest, right? I mean, it wasn't the worst, but there's a lot of more areas in Salinas that are not as safe as that area was, right? So it just kind of got me thinking about how, like, there's some people that don't have the ability, like their city is not that walkable, you know what I mean? So that's interesting. I was just wondering, Wes, how it was for you when you moved, when you started attending CSUMB. Like, I'm not sure if you lived on campus or if you guys had
I lived on East Campus.
Okay, so do you think that's walkable though? Do you think there's a lot to expose you to in the East Campus?
I feel like living there, and I had to live with different roommates. I feel like there was a lot that I was exposed to as far as different types of individuals and personalities. But then, I mean, it was the whole process of then getting on the bus and the people that I saw in there that I would then have class with. Because I feel like it wasn't as much as if I went to a bigger, maybe more populated university. I feel like Monterey definitely was more focused on like the small classroom experience. Right. So it was like quiet, but I think in that regard, it was maybe even more focused on like the individual, like identity kind of part about it, like your cultivation, because there wasn't as much like frat stuff or like extra like things that maybe like for just fun. It was a lot of like bonding, I feel like, with people, because it felt like you lived in kind of like a neighborhood somewhat.
Right.
You like more so than like living in like dorms. So it was more so like you would see people that were going to your area, and then there are people that lived in like a few blocks down, and like everybody would somewhat know each other or like have a familiarity with each other.
Right. Yeah. I feel like there isn't a lot around the university too. So it's not like it's in the middle of a city. You know what I mean? Like you can't just walk and like go to a restaurant because there's really nothing around. Like you literally either have to hop on a bus or have a car to get somewhere.
Exactly. I would say there was a lot of people from different areas though, like foreign exchange. I met a lot of foreign exchange students and a lot of people from like Sacramento, the Bay, and farther south than me in California, like in the OC. I met people from a lot of those different areas over there, and Bakersfield too.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people from Northern California definitely come up here.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I also I was thinking about as you both were talking about kind of like discovering new places and stuff, and I just wonder, do you guys think that it's different because you are men? Like, do you think it's the same for like women and being able to explore, or because the first thing that came to my mind as a woman was like the whole safety of like new places and like the fear of that. So it kind of feels like a limitation in the sense just being a woman, like not being able to develop that sense of discovery or whatever it is, identity or whatever you want to call it, because I am a woman. You know what I mean?
I definitely understand that because I've heard of that stigma a lot. You probably heard of it too. I've heard that stigma with women, and it makes a lot of sense because there's, as far as I feel like exploration, someone else was telling me, this was a friend of mine, and they were saying that like they wish they had that as a woman. They were saying they wish they had the ability to like not care, like to go somewhere alone and it doesn't really matter. And I feel like that kind of ties to it because as a man, you can kind of explore like who you want to be in your identity and the facets of that without really worrying about the danger aspect in it. And I think women are like have that to worry about, which really hinders them in like trying to pursue their unique voice and identity, because it's like I also got to be on guard, and that's a part of my identity.
I agree wholeheartedly. This is something that I've thought about a lot because for two reasons. One, thinking of like my own experience, and two, thinking of my sister's experience because she's about to start college. She's just graduated high school, and so she's getting fresh to go out and explore the world. But I don't think that my sister could do the same things that I did, for the plain reason that I don't think, like, the thing was, when I was in New York, I loved exploring. I loved going any and everywhere, and it got to the point where I lived in Brooklyn, and so like, you know, New York is notoriously like, it doesn't, like, some neighborhoods are great, some neighborhoods aren't less, you know, safe, quote unquote. And so like, but I try to not let that deter me to the point to where I try to push myself to see where I could and couldn't go, like, and I found that there was low-key nowhere, at least that I had gone to, that I couldn't go on my own. Like, I walked genuinely in a lot of different neighborhoods all throughout the Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Staten Island, like, just to see, one, to explore, but two, to see, like, what would happen if I walk? Like, because people kind of paint a picture sometimes that is scary, right? And I would walk late at night, I would walk, and the thing is also,
it's like putting yourself in, like, you're thinking about it, like, in your sister's shoes, you're like,
I don't think she could do that.
But
not because I don't think she doesn't have the drive, but I think because it's not safe, realistically speaking.
Yeah, but that's not in her mindset, realistically, like, as you don't, in your toolbox, and it's when it comes to trying to cultivate your identity. Mm-hmm. Like, exactly. As a woman, because you're like, that's not the move. Yeah, like, that's not the way I can cultivate my identity, by, like, because it's like, because you have to add in that other factor, and that's, in some senses, like, we can get into why that's also not right on the patriarchal tip, because
it's fucked up.
It's limiting, because it's like we have a lot of the avenues to it, and I'm sure Daisy could speak to this, and like, as a woman, there's like not as many avenues, I guess, to doing that. And I feel like one thing that is a universal avenue for everybody to doing that, which we'll get into as well, is the music. which is why music is there. I feel like because it's that universal outlet to everybody's kind of like the cultivation of everybody's kind of like identity and stuff, because it's like that universal voice.
Definitely. No, but I mean, to touch on a couple things that you were talking on there, but the like and this is kind of, I think, goes with what the general topic of what Daisy was asking was, is it okay for a female to, or is it safe enough, comparably safe, you know? No, I don't think so, because of the patriarchal society. I think that system is messed up in the sense that it's not even just a patriarchal society, it's a society that, fuck, this is a good question. It's just,
You could even go back to it just being like,
it's a society that encourages misogynistic, like how can I say this? It encourages like some misogynistic views in the sense of not fully like giving repercussions to deter it, or not fully like putting the efforts into deter it, essentially, or to combat it when it happens. And so that creates this environment where women can't feel safe, where they're walking down the street because they're like, well, what happens if I do something? Is anyone going to say something? Like,
and I understand that, because it's similar to like being, unfortunately, like being black in America, and like how that shapes cultivating your identity. Like I could speak to that, obviously, being like a part part Mexican and part black. I could definitely say that in America, cultivating your identity definitely comes with that part, like knowing that and knowing that there's discrimination towards that, and it's not set up in your favor, and you're gonna have to like somewhat try harder and like do a lot more. And I feel like that goes to what you're saying, and those are our hindrances to it. But I feel like when you get deep into those hindrances too, cultivating your identity, they also shape you, and which is the tough part about it, is because like things like that really shape you into kind of like, at least me artistically, especially into the kind of music I listen to a lot of like protest even style music, or music that isn't on where it's like on that vein, but I feel like those experiences kind of shape you, even if it's like out of my shoes and someone else's shoes. If you listen to maybe more like women-centered music that's like empowering of that, it could be from like a lot of, you know, personal struggles you face and saw in your shoes of being like oppressed, and now you're like, well, this is more so what I want to listen to because that's what I've experienced, and this resonates with me in that way. So it's like, that's something new. I kind of, maybe for the life affirmation section, I've been kind of thinking about. But
very cool. No, I wanted to touch on something like they were saying of like the oppression. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think that's like the best part about being a minority. You know, myself being, I'm half Mexican, half Argentinian. I'm you know, I've always been surrounded in Latin culture, and you know, Latins aren't the best viewed in America as a whole sometimes, and which is sad. But that kind of viewpoint, kind of like the same way of like,
it's like the saying, having a chip on your shoulder,
you know what I mean? Like that, those like the same thing we were talking about, like the sand and like the flat surface, like that, those bumps, those hard times are what help shape you into making you better, and making, like, if you think about like creatives and people that go on to do like great things, like ultimately, like, you know, sometimes they get not sometimes, they often get exploited by other folks, and like a lot of people don't get recognized. But if you look at the root of a lot of people, it's a lot of folks of minority based, you know, from all across the board, a lot of different races, that are the ones that are pushed into the corner, and then they thrive because, you know, they don't back down, and we just kind of push forward. And so I think it's something that all of us can relate to, you know, having been, because all of us are at the very least Mexican, you know, at least partially, and so we all kind of have at least base in that kind of, seeing that kind of like that oppression and how it affects our general society, our general culture, our friends, our family, and how it's helped shape us into being, you know, who we want to be. And who we want to be is someone that pushes past those oppressions, someone that kind of proves it, like, nah, that's not the real deal, you know? At least in my opinion.
I know, I totally agree. Especially because I mean, like you mentioned, we all have a little bit of Mexican in us, at least partially, to use your words, which is true. It's like it helps you and it shapes you for the better, because not only, like, for example, for myself, because I am a woman, right, and I am Mexican, so there's not only like that societal pressure or expectations, but there's also um, that cultural expectations or pressure or whatever it is that you want to call it. So there's that cultural influence now you not only have society, you also have your culture, or like your background or your practices or your customs that are influencing or pulling you this way or pulling you that way. So I definitely agree that it really helps shape you, and I couldn't agree more that it's for the better.
It's awesome. So what's your opinion on the safety issue when it comes to women? The safety issue when it comes to walking and being able to find yourself by exploring and pushing yourself.
Periods, yeah, like what you can and can't do as far as like exploration and finding yourself and trying new things, because you do have to be on guard of like society.
So what do you mean? Like, what is my thoughts on?
Do you feel like you have to be on guard?
Oh, absolutely. For sure. I don't feel like I see. I don't know. I don't know if it's because of where I grew up or how I grew up. But I definitely do feel like there is no real space for me to be able to go do all these things that I would like to do, or that sound like, oh, I wish I could go and walk, the streets of this new place that I'm discovering, or this new place where I find myself. But I definitely do feel like I'm on guard all the time. I feel like, I don't know if maybe it's just in my head. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's it's a mental thing. But I also think that a lot of it is perhaps more than I want it to be, is rooted in like the cultural aspect of it, because as a woman, and like I mentioned at the beginning when I was introducing myself, I grew up in a fairly traditional Mexican household. And as a woman, I was not allowed to do certain things. You know what I mean? Like there was things that my brother could do, but that Daisy couldn't, because he's a guy. Like literally those were the words. It's like he's a man, like he's a boy or whatever, and that's why you can't do them. So I feel like maybe that definitely had something to do with the way that even if subconsciously I now associate to certain things where it's like, oh, even though I don't want to adopt those beliefs, they're still there, maybe etched in the back of my mind, where it's like, oh, but a woman's not supposed to do that. You know what I mean?
Makes sense. And I would say, going off of like that drive, because I know that gave you like the same way with the other stuff, would you say that built you, like a drive in you to be focused, like in your career or in school?
For sure. I feel like it also let me see, how should I say this? I definitely do feel like it drove me, and it has driven me to like want to do whatever it is that I want to do. I think that it affected my I guess like my timeline as well, because I know that I mentioned to you all that, I'm a non-traditional student. So obviously I had to leave school for a little bit. That's basically the gist of it. Right. And I feel like a lot of it was a cultural aspect of it, where it's like you have certain responsibilities that you have to fulfill. I don't know if that's just because I was Mexican, to be completely honest, because I'm not anything but that. So I don't know how other like cultures kind of handle that, but I am the baby of the family. And I am a woman, and I am Mexican, right? So there's all these things that kind of played into my, I guess you could say like I don't want to say my future, but like the decisions that I made were heavily based on that, and the cultural aspect of how I was raised, and like reaching certain goals, and having to halt those a little bit because of family, whether it was family dynamic or family like duties, etc. So yeah, I definitely do feel like that had a huge impact on where I am now and how I got here.
Yeah, wow, that makes a lot of sense, because I wanted to know a little bit about like what we could both share on, like what our what career you hope to have now, and did your, like, since those experiences shaped your personality and like in like your identity, how does that relate to your career, like your identity as of now, and like as of how being in Monterey and going to school, how has that shaped you going forward with what career you're going for, and what career are you going for? Because I know for me, I knew what I wanted to do somewhat before I went over to school, but I feel like I definitely, through a lot of these type of experiences that we're talking about, learned more and really carved more into what I really want to do as my career and my identity going forward, like who I want to be, what kind of life I want to live. That didn't really happen to me until the past, as of recent.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I mentioned this to you in the past, but I don't think I've mentioned it on the podcast. So I was actually in banking up until a few months ago. During COVID, I actually left my position in banking. And it's weird because I feel like the way that it's kind of panned out for me, or the process that led me to it, is a little bit different, because I feel like I had a path that I wanted to go to prior to banking. And then banking kind of fell on my lap, and it was good for me. You know what I mean? Like it turned out to be a good place for me to grow and to be comfortable, like to live a comfortable lifestyle, I guess you could say. So it's interesting because I feel like because of how I grew up and where I grew up is what kind of kept me in banking, because of that like security, like that financial security. And it really got me to thinking is if I really wanted to do that for the rest of my life, because even though I was good at it, I didn't really find it as fulfilling as I thought I would. I was good at it, and I feel like I could still go back to it if I really wanted to, because I actually genuinely enjoyed it. But it, my plan was not that, so that's kind of what made me question it. So yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it worked out a little bit different for me, because I'm currently still in the process of like figuring out what it is that I really truly want to do, and that I want to put my energy into, because banking was not it. And this literally, like I said, just happened like 2020. So it hasn't even been a year that this happened. So that's kind of where I am right now.
Wow, that's really great to hear that you had an experience like that was kind of like fruitful for you, and you got to learn from it. Because a lot of times I feel like I have those experiences, and sometimes they can kind of like take me a step back even to like learn something. It's kind of good that you got one where it was able to kind of be taken within stride. Like it maybe was not exactly what you wanted to do, but it was working in this particular area for yourself.
Right.
What about you, Mauricio?
So for me, it took me a while. When I first went to school for college, I went in as a chemical and biomolecular engineer. It was cool field, very interesting, but I learned that it wasn't what I wanted to do after all, you know what I mean? I went into it because I knew I was good at science and math, and I knew that it would pay well over, like, in the end. I was like, well, it should be able to pay back my college loans, and that's good enough. I'll get a good job with this, da-da-da. But as I started getting to my classes, and I had to take a class that was more of like what the labs and directly would be doing for the rest of my life. You know, if I was going to be like a lab director, which is kind of what I was leaning towards at the time, right? And so I was like, all right, if I wanted to run up my experiment, what I would do, and I had to do it, and I was like, this sucks. And I was like starting to do the whole process like this is terrible. This is a lot of fucking work, and I don't like this. This is stuff that I'm not enjoying now, and I'm just barely getting into it. I don't stand a chance, in the future. So I had to call my mom and my dad that night and let them know that I wasn't happy with what I was doing anymore, and that I wanted to switch. So I tried to switch into communicative sciences and disorders, which was kind of like focusing on hearing disorders and speech impediments.
pretty cool.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Very, very cool stuff. Because it was something that, like, a class that I'd taken while I was there kind of enlightened me to the fact that I'm really lucky to have the opportunity to, part of identity, part of who we are is our health. You know what I mean? Our just general health. And I think a lot of people overlook the fact that we're lucky. And I don't mean to say that other people are unlucky when they're born with certain disorders and disabilities, but I'm just saying in the sense that we sometimes overlook the struggles that these people go through, that are born with these certain conditions, that really define who they are. There's certain conditions that's what you're born with, and that's your life. Like, everything is going to revolve around this certain disease. Your entire day is scheduled because you have this going on, and that's that. Like, that's the whole thing. And that really kind of I wanted to help in a certain way, and that was a really cool field, the communicative sciences. So that was what got me into that. But regardless, I couldn't fully go through with it because I had to switch schools. They didn't offer that degree where I wanted to go from there forward. So I had to do a switch. That was another moment where I was like, well, maybe the cards just aren't aligning for me here. So then that's when I switched to communications over at Santa Barbara.
You had a long journey, huh?
I did. I went to communications, which was cool, but it just wasn't I just wasn't in this classes, and I was like, I learned a lot for sure.
In Santa Barbara, right?
Yeah, that was in Santa Barbara, but it was just a lot of life struggles going on at the time, and I got to a point where I actually hit, like, that's probably one of my most defining moments, like, as identity, if I really do truly think about it, is I had, like, a major breakdown when I was there. Major breakdown. And I had to yet again call my parents and let them know, like, this isn't working out. But this time it was more of like, life just isn't working out. And that's when that was on some, like, deeper things. I had to go home and kind of restructure my life and rethink of who I am, what I am.
Like we're talking about, like, what do you want to do as a career and your identity?
Exactly.
Like, what kind of person you want to be?
I had honestly no idea. And I was just kind of just seeing what sounded cool, what did I enjoy. And before I left Santa Barbara, before I had this whole kind of breakdown, and it was a breakdown, but before I left there, I was about to get a job as a crepe chef for my roommate. He's like a head chef, or my roommate at the time was a head chef at a French restaurant. And so he was going to hook it up with, like, position, really cool dude, and he was going to help teach me, like, along those lines, because I'd been in the food industry for, like, kind of side jobs my entire since I was, like, a kid up until now, right? Up until then. So I was, like, super down and willing to do it, but I just didn't have the opportunity to go all the way through. So I started kind of learning, but didn't go all the way. So I was like, all right, maybe I'll try out doing some culinary stuff. So I started taking culinary classes here at a local community college, COC, and couldn't even really, like, it was just so impacted I couldn't get classes there. And so I was like, man, I'm every time I try going into something else like that, I'm getting some wall that just isn't letting me go through. So that's when I had to really reflect, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just stop thinking and relying on these things, and I'm gonna just focus on something that sounds cool and fun. And then I'd bought a MIDI keyboard just because I used to play piano as a kid, so I was like, I'll give it a try. This looks like fun, digital piano. And I fell in love with the piano. Was cool, but I didn't know how to use it, so I was like, I'm gonna take a class. I took that class to learn how to use this thing, fell in love with the class. The teacher really, really inspired me. And in that class, I know I've told you about this before, but I'll mention it here, that's where I made the Metamorphosis instrumental. And then whilst I was in that first class is when we linked up and started the Vine Tree, started working together and doing what we did. And so that moment in that class really cemented, like, oh, I love this. This is some cool stuff. And we were having fun. So I was like, maybe this is what I really want to do. Because then I started seeing how I could apply it more as to, like, because then the thing was, genuinely what made me realize that we could do this was working with you. Because when we did it and realizing, like, I don't have to rely on, sorry, I'll put I realized that I don't have to rely on, like, an outside, like, gig, like an outside, and it's like, granted, so you know, as an engineer, when I was, you know, learning engineering at the time, like, it is a lot of freelance work, and it still is, like, mainly based. You could get jobs at like a corporate level, don't get me wrong, but, you know, it's mainly a lot of freelance stuff.
But those were the moments, like, how do I say, those are some of the defining moments, like that. Well, I would say first defining moment obviously is the one you described of being over there and then having to at Santa Barbara and deciding not to do it. But then the other ones are the defining moments that got you to see that, one, that the music can be something you really want to do, but then deeper than that, it's like that you can just do it. That you just need, all right, there's someone that could rap, there's someone I could make this, I could put this out, and then it's done.
Exactly. That was genuinely my first kind of moment and experience of being able to just say, oh, I could just do it and actually do it. And like when I just did it, like the song was dope. Like I fell in love with it the first time the first time I heard it, because you sent the vocals over, I was like, this is crazy, this is awesome. And like that moment like really kind of solidified going forward, like this is what I can do and what I want to do. Like, and it was just not what I can do, like what I want to do that I can do.
But
like in the sense I can do it for myself.
How it starts with, similar to what Daisy was saying, it's interesting to me how it starts with the moment of this isn't what I want to do.
Yes. That's true.
That's the comment there I'm seeing there. Like, it starts with the moment of like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this, and then it kind of leads you to think of what you really want to do.
That's facts. No, it's super facts.
For me, I would think it was similar, but I mean shorter, because I've been trying to make music since I was like 16, and I was writing songs for like my friend they were a singer, and then eventually I thought those were pretty good and I wanted to rap. But at that point in time, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I had to go to college. Similar to what Daisy was saying, my mom was Mexican, so she's pretty strict, and she was pretty like you have to go to college. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My dad wanted me to do sports, but then eventually I stopped having as much interest in sports and became more interested in music. And so then it kind of shifted to both of my parents kind of being very serious about only going to college, because then there wasn't really an outside hobby or anything that I had outside of running. So then I think that's when I started taking, like, as I graduated high school, I started taking the music a lot more serious, like trying to make at least the freedom that I had being an adult and being, like, as we talked about, I guess, a man, and not having to worry about as much responsibilities of taking care of myself. I would kind of just go to different studios my friends would have and practice a lot. And then I think the main thing I learned in that time was the identity cultivation part, because I didn't know what I was doing, but I was figuring it out and I was being unapologetic about it. So eventually I just made enough mistakes that I had to take a break. Like Mauricio, in his story, he had to a break point where I had to take a break and focus on getting back on track with school, because I was on track, but I was kind of like a little bit not as focused as I was. And with doing that, a lot of things, like he said, it opened up. And then I met Mauricio at that time because I started focusing on school and I had more time to like think about, at least not be stressed about school, but think about what I want to do with my career. I think that's a lot of people's struggle in trying to cultivate their identity throughout school, is that you're probably so stressed about trying to figure out the school that you don't have as much time to sit and think about what you want to be like after you're done with school, what kind of job you want.
That's so true. It's sad, and I think that's like the saddest part about school, that they often force you into those positions, you know what I mean, where you don't get to fully think out a plan more so, you know what I mean. But it's hard, because it's hard to figure it out, because a lot of times is you have to go through it to figure out, like you said, what you don't like.
A jump, yeah, where you're like, okay, I'm ahead of the game right here, and then you kind of have some time to like, and that's what happened to me, like within that little time period of being in community college and kind of being on top of that, like how Daisy even described it, like it felt like going through the motions in the beginning. That going through the motions part is kind of what helped me start the music thing and have a little bit of time to figure it out. And then I learned a lot of different things about myself when I got to a little bit more harder parts of college and I was out there in Monterey, because it was like a little harder, but I went through those parts. And by that time I kind of had figured out somewhat that I made that song with Mauricio, and I had somewhat figured out what I wanted to do as far as like the end game in my career. So I think that's kind of interesting how we all talked about our stories, but I feel like one way we could thread it together, like I said, was going through that patch of this isn't what I want to do.
And I'm glad, because that genuinely, when we've got like, music was the catalyst of realizing that like I don't want to be working necessarily for someone else for the rest of my life. Like I want to be just I want to do something for me. And so that was the start of really trying to build a brand and expanding like pushing my own limits as well. Like music was the start of it, but music isn't the end of it for me. Like it was where it was cemented of like, all right, this is I can build something, you know.
Like you don't see yourself getting super tired of this, really. It's like you like it.
I love it. I love it, but I love it on the grander scale of like more than just doing like the engineering. I love the grander scale of building something that is dope, like something that is just that I enjoy, and I hope that's something that I think that can work well enough that other people will enjoy.
All right. Well, questions for everybody about these times. So something that we had written down on our notes was to ask everybody about, because this is going to be used in the music segment too, but we all want to talk about music that shaped us in those moments. So now, I mean, we've all shared like the moments that kind of like really defined us, like especially like the downs, like the moments where it was like something I really was frustrated at this job, or the ups where it was like I got to the new school or I got to the new area and I was able to. But what in those moments were like some of the songs or music that you were listening to that kind of just got you through that time period, or even you just associate with that time period?
Daisy, do you want to start?
Yeah. So I actually wanted a comment, but I don't want to interrupt Wes, about what you were talking about and just finding like that you love. And I think that's so amazing. And it's crazy to me because I feel like a lot of times, speaking about identity and like finding yourself and discovering yourself and like just knowing that, I think it's wild when you think about the fact that there are a lot of us that in this world, in our lives, I mean, life is so short, right? But in our lives, I don't want to say we're never, but yeah, there's a lot of people that never find that. And it's crazy to think how people have, I guess you could say, the guts to not only question themselves and be like, hey, hold on, like this isn't what I want to do. And actually going through that scary process of discovering what it is that they want to do or what it is that they truly love. I always say, like, you know, that one quote where it's like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I feel like that's a lot of what it is. Like, life is so short in general, to be doing things that you hate or that you don't like. So I honestly, like, I think it's awesome that you have found that, because like I said, a lot of people don't want to go through that scary process, and they never, in essence, it's like you never find your true potential. And that doesn't necessarily entail being like successful or making quote unquote successful or making the most money, but it's just like what brings you happiness. You know what I mean? So yeah, anyway, just wanted to say that side note, I guess.
No, that was really good.
Let's see. As far as me music, I don't know. I feel like kind of putting me on the spot in terms of that, but I feel like one of the first songs, and I feel it's gonna sound a little cliche because it's like everybody kind of knows this song, but in the midst of like discovering, I don't want to say myself, but just kind of like discovering like that maybe I wasn't, I don't know, in the best place or whatnot. I gotta say that Tupac is always my go-to. I feel like you can never really go wrong with him. And Keep Your Head Up, I feel it's just like one of those songs that just like you can't not like fuck with it. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's probably the first. I don't know why that song came to my. I feel like I haven't even listened to Tupac in a while, but I don't know why that song just came up in my head when thinking about all this.
I can see it, because that's definitely like a classic song. I love that song, and it's a motivational song. Like if I'm ever going through like hard times or something, I would play that song, and I was kind of made the notion to do that probably earlier than I was even like supposed to. Like I feel like I always would play that song, even if it was like a rainy day when I was a kid. It just seemed like that type of like music or vibe. I don't
Isn't
know.
it crazy though, Wes, too? Because it's like you grow up now, and obviously, like now, I feel like we're adults. We're grown. Like maybe our struggles are different than they were when we first heard it, or we first remember like playing it. And we were like 11 years old, or whatever it was. But it's like there's like a newfound meaning to it. You know what I mean? Like there's like a whole new meaning.
Yeah, I talk about that with Mauricio a lot. Like as you kind of come of understanding of who you are, you understand the songs differently. Like you can relate to them a different way, and like they hit differently. Cause it's like, all right, like maybe I was mad that day at school, but like today I like gotta go to work or something, and it's like I don't want to be at work. It's a different kind of struggle. At least I'm relating to. For me, I guess I'll go off mine. I think you'll probably pick it up then. I think. For me, I would say a lot of those times when I was really like kind of like at CSUN and I was in the business program, or when I didn't want to be there, or when I was like kind of like just going through different times of music, like making music with different other people, and I was kind of just practicing, not really knowing. I feel like on that time, a lot of the soundtrack to those days had to be like, I at least listened to a lot of like Gold Link and definitely Kendrick Lamar though. I think that's something that's been constant throughout those times, like the songs like Fear and songs from like, because that was newer though. Even when I go to like older songs like The Heart, there's like a series Kendrick Lamar has, says like The Heart Part 1 through 4. I feel like it's interesting because it came out I think a while ago, maybe like 2012 or 13 when they started, and those songs always got to me in a way of like I remember the specific times, and when I was like 13 or like 14, and then when I was like 16 and 17 when I like heard those songs, and I felt like it was really as if within those moments maybe I was really thinking deeper or something, because it was more about what he was saying in that song. And like that song, I don't play that song too often because it was like on a mixtape, but I know whenever I'm in that type of zone, it's in that reflective zone that what we're talking about, like when you get the time to really think and like cultivate those ideas. So I feel like there are certain songs for me, I guess, that or that type of music that I play in that time, and I always have throughout time. You know what I mean? They're always kind of like my go-to is like, oh yeah, these songs feel like this.
Like where you're actually paying attention to the lyrics, or the lyrics is speaking to you.
Yeah, exactly. There's like a few songs that I'm always remember, like, oh, this song really did speak to me, and it kind of goes in that memory of like the songs that do speak to me in that way. What about you, Marie? Do you have any songs like that, or any, even if it's not a song like that, I'm sure you maybe have like a specific song in like that sits in with you in like going to New York, or like right before New York you were playing this a bunch, or right after when you came back and you went to Santa Barbara, you started listening to this, you were listening to a whole bunch of this type of music or this artist.
So the thing for me is like, honestly.
Oh, actually, I have a question. What were you listening to, if you can remember, at the time, right when you left Santa Barbara and it was like you were dunzo?
No, it was dunzo.
Like what around that time was like your jam? Like was it the Isaiah Rashad album? Because I know you used to listen to that a lot around that time.
I was jamming to the Isaiah Rashad. I was jamming to.
Because I feel like that must have been a deep thinking time for you. You know what I mean? A lot was going on. You really had to be thinking about a lot.
Definitely. So, okay. So, to get down into, all right. So this is touching on a couple different things. So one, I do remember what I was listening in the general time frame of like, that of that era, because for me, I feel like a lot of what I love about music, for me, a big thing is it's very memory based. Like for me, if someone showed me a song, I will probably remember that you showed me that song. Like if there something happened like cool while listening to that song, I'll probably, even if something happened that wasn't that cool, if for whatever reason that song was playing, I have a tendency of kind of remembering when I at least first heard it, or like or at least the most resonant memory with it, right? So I do definitely remember listening to a lot of, in that general time frame of like that era, I was definitely a lot of Isaiah Rashad, Joey Badass, Travis Scott, but at the time, because that stuff was like enjoying, but because we're talking about like the time of like deep thought, realistically I was actually not having a lot of deep thought for a lot of time.
That's what I was maybe thinking.
And I was gonna say, I was actually just kind of just turning up and kind of just living a zoned out life for.
Because that was when you decided to not like quit. So, but it wasn't so much so of like focus, like this is not what I want to do. It was more so like I'm out of focus, I need to go refocus.
If you want to know, actually there was something audio, or actually it was a TV show, but I guess it does relate in audio wise, because it was something that I was watching and that it hit me in a way that's low-key what caused me to break down. It was an old South Park episode.
Okay. There we go.
It was just, I don't even know.
The way the South Park episode hit, though, it made you think about certain aspects of your
They're so real,
life.
bro. They hit on some really deep shit, which is one of the reasons I love that show. But like that night, I was just a little too turned in to begin with, and then I was watching this, and it just that time that's when I really started just thinking in that moment, and I was like, "Fuck, this is all wrong. Like this is all wrong. What I'm doing right now with my life is just wrong. Like this isn't right. I don't feel right. I don't feel happy with what I'm doing." So there was like an audio thing or like something that did kind of trigger that breakthrough or that deep moment. And it got, shit kind of hit the fan from there a little bit. But so that was more like an audio cue that did kind of trigger that. But you were
pulling from music.
But it wasn't music at the time.
You weren't pulling from music in that sense at that time. It was more so music for you was more so like the theme music, like the soundtrack to just...
Yeah, the thing, exactly how you're saying.
Okay, I understand how that can be, because that happens at times.
But no, there's definitely a lot of music for at any time. Like it's hard to think of, because are we talking about the songs that we chose for the end, because those do have
I mean, not exactly, but it could double as that. More so just songs that do have meaning, and I was kind of doubling it as that. So like, cause I know the songs, I forgot about the songs I had for the end. I remember that the one I chose though did have some type of significant meaning to some point in my life. What was yours?
Because I remember like those played in as those answers, like kind of like the New York, the Santa Barbara stuff. If you want to see the ones, you can hear it.
I know. I remember Daisy's. If she wants to talk about hers a little bit, I remember yours was the J. Cole song.
No, mine was
No, Daisy's. That's it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think Mauricio, I think you had like a Kanye West.
I did.
One.
I had I remember exactly which one. So I had Kanye's Ultralight Beams, and I picked that one because that came out when I was in New York, and that was the first time that I really kind of was given the opportunity to go out to a concert by myself. I'll say an event, because it wasn't really a concert, but it was when he was doing, I think, like Yeezy season 3, something like that.
It was like a fashion show.
It was a fashion show, but he was premiering his new album, The Life of Pablo, that night. And so I went to it, loved that event, and it was kind of helped solidifying. This was early on in time being in New York, and so I was like solidifying, like, okay, this is me living a more independent lifestyle, me being able to go do things on my own. So whenever I listen to that song, like, it really just throws me back to that moment of going to this big event on my own, just because why won't I go to this place? Because it was a thing where, like, did friends cop tickets, did they not? I don't know. It doesn't matter. This is something that I need to go to it because I want to go to it, and I need to stop. At that moment, it was a moment of like kind of me telling myself like I need to stop limiting myself of going or doing things because perhaps the people that I'm with at the moment don't want to go do it, or like for whatever reason can't. Like it's just kind of like, all right, that needs to not be a thing for me. And so I love that song because it throws me back to that moment.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Did he sing live?
No, he didn't. He didn't. He plugged his laptop in and he jammed out. He like DJ'd it live, and he had like a lot of folks that were like on the album or just friends and family like around him.
It was like the meme, right, where everyone's jumping around.
Yeah, exactly. That meme was born that day. But yeah, so
let's ask you all then.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
No, I was just gonna say it was. Like as an event, low key, like this is on a separate note, but it wasn't what I expected.
Did you pay for it?
Yeah, I did pay for it. It wasn't what I expected, but I'm grateful for the event. And I guess that's really what Kanye excels in, is he excels in like the experience, selling like the overall feeling of going there and like that moment, as opposed to, while he does put on great shows and great like events, like it's sometimes less centered around that sometimes, you know what I mean?
I definitely would
about
say
being
that.
there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what that felt like for me. So, but that also taught me something else, you know? But yeah, so that was just my only little thing I wanted to comment on that.
No, that's crazy because I was actually going to ask that about. I feel like you're talking about his concerts being an experience. I've never been lucky enough to be able to attend one, but I feel like you're talking about it being an experience. And I was wondering for you two as artists, or that are in kind of like the music type of world, like how. Kind of a random question, but it just kind of popped in my mind. Like, how different, or what do you prefer? Like a live performance from it? Like, say, think of an artist that you really like you are a hardcore fan, and you prefer like the live performances of specific songs. I think a song that you really like, or do you prefer like the recorded version of it?
Only if they're a good live performer.
Yeah, for me it depends. Like if they have a good band and stuff like that. Like yeah, if they have a good live band and like they're gonna like play it differently, then yeah, I like that better. But if it's like
personally, like I agree with that. No, yeah, it's all about the for me it's the performance. If you're gonna perform better, then yeah, kill it. But if you're not gonna perform it better, then no. Let me listen to the.
Then just play it the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that.
But that's as far as performance. But the thing is, like, if you're talking about like a concert, like I'll still go to concerts of people that I maybe not are the best performers, but because I'm going there for the overall event. You know what I mean? Going there for the overall feel. And that's part of like what the artist is also cultivating, is not just the songs and listening to. So for the song itself, like you got to be a good performer for me to go for the song. But if I'm going for like the event, like that's different. Like sometimes I can carry like a little bit more weight sometimes.
Right. What music are you guys kind of like pulled towards? Like, what is the style? I mean, I know that there's so many different genres and we have all these subgenres, but what music is what attracts you the most, that you feel like you're kind of...
It depends on the day and the mood for me.
For me, yeah, because I feel like I listen to almost every music, even though I'm not like a big country fan. Like I don't even think I apply to that when people say like, oh, like I listen to everything but country. Like I feel like I even know some country songs that I might like. So I feel like I like
shit though, I gotta say.
Yeah, wait, what'd you say?
I said it's the shit. Like country goes hard, honestly.
Yeah, right.
Definitely.
Like I like Kenny Chesney. Like I saw a little bit of the country awards. It had like some cool performances on there. But I think that I would probably consider a lot of my music taste to be alternative, mostly because I like a lot of like hip hop, but I like hip hop, but I also enjoy like rock sounds. I also enjoy R&B, but I mostly enjoy things I never heard before and like combinations of stuff like blended together. So I think that's why I kind of, unfortunately, they don't really have a name for it, but I think they kind of label it alternative because it's just alternative of the regular sounding of like whatever this is. So I like things that are kind of mashed up, mixed together. I think anything that kind of like uses an element of something I like and then a different element of something I like, you probably got me already, because it's like that's just kind of like my thing. I like mixing and matching stuff. So
got it.
No, same. Wesley and I think that's something that kind of drew us together as artists, is that we do share that kind of that similar love of just all music. Like everything is meant for. Just because you may not like it at the moment doesn't mean you might not like it tomorrow or at a different time. Like there's things are meant for different occasions, for different, like there isn't a song that is like ideal for every occasion. You know what I mean? Realistically speaking, there's not one song that just fits right. Like you can maybe make it like funny wise, you know what I mean? Like it gets I
have a few, but I'm not
that fits in. When I mean like every occasion, I mean like every like dark occasions. I mean like some super sad shit, or when it comes to like some super happy or some super gore. Like when I mean every occasion, I mean every occasion. You know what I mean? So
some
like,
Michael Jackson songs you could think of.
But that's what I'm saying. Though it plays into. You laugh about it because you know that it only works in a funny sense. But that's what I'm saying. That like in a realistic sense, like it wouldn't. There's no song that goes across all the way, right? So what I'm saying is that each song is kind of meant for a different mood. Each song is kind of meant for a different emotion. So if I'm feeling like a certain thing, like it'll kind of gravitate me in a different way. I think
that's the biggest fact about it, I guess, is that like certain songs hit better in different parts. I feel like there's songs that can like really work in a lot of different. There's very versatile songs,
without a doubt.
But there's songs that just like there's moments that just make certain songs amplified in a way that you just can't. You know, like if I'm jumping in the pool while this song was going on, that was the first time I jumped in the pool. It's just not gonna hit the same again.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, if you think about it, I feel like that's kind of why people make playlists, because there's certain songs that just go with certain moods. It's like you go to the gym, you have your gym playlist type of thing. You go, you're hanging out with friends, you have a different playlist. You know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like that's kind of why we make playlists, because even though I feel like music is a universal language, different songs mean different things to different people, or like they take you back to that moment in a different way. Like they don't all mean the same thing to like me and you know what I mean? Like a sad song could be a happy song to me, and a happy song could be a sad song to you because it reminds you of some you know, like some dark place or like some sad place in your life, or you know, some sad, you know, I don't know, like just like a different situations call for different types of music because of that, the feelings that they evoke, I feel like.
Without a doubt. But low key, I will say, I personally only have one playlist I listen to.
Really?
For me, if I listen to a song and I like it, it goes into that playlist. Doesn't matter what genre, doesn't matter what artist, it goes into this one playlist. And so this playlist has thousands of songs in it, whole different styles, but I love it because the reason I do it is intentionally so that like on moments when I'm like, I don't know what I'm feeling, throw on shuffle and then it could just take me anywhere and I'll catch a certain vibe. Granted, I don't like listen to it all the way through sometimes because certain songs, it switches around a little bit too drastically.
I was gonna say, speaking to identity, that's too variable for like my identity's sake. Like
sometimes I gotta skip and I'm like, all right, I'm not in the mood for this. It's almost like,
like certain moments I know how I feel and I'm like, this is not how I feel. But I enjoy that because I listen to a lot of different musics. But that's the annoying part, is that like certain points in time I might feel like it might be too different than how I feel that day. Like I might know exactly how I feel that day.
Without a doubt. And I'm in the same boat, but when I'm feeling that, I just go straight to the art, like straight, and I know exactly what I'm feeling. I'm like, all right, I'll go straight to that album, go straight to that song, or go straight to that. But as far as like a playlist that I
when
have
you don't know,
and
it
cultivate,
helps because you're just like, hey, it's a surprise. Like,
yeah,
I like that.
Okay, so I have a question for you guys then, because we're talking about that and shuffling and all that good stuff. Is there ever a time, and if so, like how do you go about your playlist or your music when you literally don't know what to listen to? Like you're just like not really feeling anything. And if so, what do you go to?
That playlist.
Yeah. See, for me, I don't have that, so it's like tough. And I would say yes, those are like the worst times ever. I actually really dislike that moment. Like a few days ago that happened where I'm just like, I usually know exactly what I'm feeling, like what we were just talking about. But then for the past couple days I was like, I kind of was a few days I was like, I really don't know what I want. And I was looking at what I had listened to, and I was like, I listened to this yesterday, I listened to these 3 albums for the past couple of days. I'm like, none of these I want to listen to. I think what I do, I really look for something that I haven't, like an album that I haven't listened to. It could be new, or it could be like maybe an older album of like some artist that I already like I go to find like, all right, I never listened to this one by them, because it's literally like I like listening to new stuff. I think that's a pet peeve I have. It's like I like listening to something new. I can listen to certain albums again on repeat, but it's only like a handful of albums that I like to that degree where I'm like, I could listen to this all the time. Like most albums I gotta keep switching out of to be like, all right, I can have them in a mix. Like I think that's why it makes other people make miniature playlists in comparison to your big playlist, is for that reason. It's because I can make miniature playlists of a bunch of different new things of all different vibes. And I like that because it's like, I don't want to listen to like the new hip hop right now, or like the new, but I might have like some R&B or like some rock or whatever.
So what I'm going to say with this is, you know me, we both talk about new music all the time. I love actively trying to listen to some new stuff. But what I do when I listen to new music is I'm listening to see like, is this good enough to go into that playlist almost? You know what I mean? Okay. And that genuinely is my measure. Like whenever you ask me like
but when you don't know what to play, you literally just throw on the playlist?
Yes, because I cannot tell you how many times like I tried, like I recommend this to both of you guys. Like just try it. Build a playlist, start it today, tomorrow, whatever, right? And from this point forward, every song that you add to a different playlist, just add it to that other playlist as well. And so that when you have that moment of like, fuck, what does fate have in store for me today? Just throw that on shuffle and see what comes out. And you, like, it can change your day like that, bro. You honestly, it's crazy. There's been moments where it changes my day, or moments where it just aligns so perfectly that it's like, this was too meant to be.
That made my Netflix a lot more active. It's all about personalizing it and adding like your unique voice or whatever to that. I will say that made my Netflix a lot more accessible. and HBO too, by adding a whole bunch of like stuff to my list. I don't know if anybody else does that. Like to
I
like
do. Like similar to whatever you watched, I've been doing that a lot.
Yeah, the similar twos are hard, but I know what you mean. I think what Wesley's talking about is like kind of like customizing, like saying like, all right, this is what I like.
But even that, where it's like, yeah, like the ones where it's similar to, like, or I'll just add them,
yeah,
and like
to
save
the
them
watch
because
list.
it's like
Yeah.
it'll, like you said, when I don't know what to watch, it's like that rarely happens now because
Now you're
I just
plugged up.
add way more than
That's
I'm
smart.
even interested in, and it's like, all right, well, there's some ones that I was kind of interested in, like.
That's okay, smart. I see. I don't do it with my streaming. I only do it with my like video stuff. I only do it with my music. But I gotta start applying that to
You know
Netflix
what?
and shit.
It's crazy too because I feel like because I'm bilingual and I feel like music was a huge influence when I was growing up, like cultural music, like Spanish music. I listened to that growing up. So sometimes I feel like it's even harder because then choosing a song is just like, oh God, well, what do I want to listen to? Do I want to listen to banda? Do I want to listen to mariachi? Like, am I feeling? I also feel like it kind of sucks because not all Spanish music, and maybe people, if they hear this, are gonna like come for me and be like, that's not what Spanish music is about. But at least the Spanish music that I grew up listening to, and that just kind of like takes me back to those good moments and like childhood and like kind of like worry-free times in life. I feel like a lot of them are like very like heartbreaky, like very
Like sad sometimes.
yes,
Like
yes,
the
that.
story of them sometimes are sad.
Exactly. Like when you really listening to the lyrics, it's like, oh shit, I didn't even know what that song was about that. So sometimes I feel like I kind of gravitate towards that type of music, and it kind of sucks sometimes because I'm like, I don't really want to listen to that. You know, when you like listen to sad music when you're sad and you just get like sadder, that's kind of how I feel it happens. But a lot of times, a lot of that sad music is just like, it's not even, you know, yeah, it's talking about like maybe it's talking about drinking or about so and so killing someone, like, you know, like corridos type of thing. But to me, it's not even like that. Yeah, like now that I'm older, I understand it, but now it's just like, oh, but it just takes me back to such good memories. You know what I mean? So, I feel like it gets harder as I've gotten older now that I know what a lot of the music says. And I'm like, oh shit, like that's what that's about. But then also like when I'm not sure what I'm in the mood for, I'm like, okay, do I want to listen to Spanish music or do I want to listen to English music? Or like even at work where it's like, there's obviously certain things that I can't play at work, or I mean, that I used to not be able to play at work. So it's like creating that playlist for that. Sometimes it's like, oh God, I literally don't even know what to play because there's just so many options. Being bilingual, I feel like the more options I have, the harder it gets sometimes.
I want to see, you brought up something that I think is kind of interesting because it's something that Wesley and I have been talking about a little bit lately. And you mentioned that when you listen to certain songs, you listen back and you're like, oh, the lyrics are a little like, whoa, this might be a little intense here. Like, I didn't expect this. And you're like, oh, it's
She's
just...
saying like, I didn't remember that she listened to this when she was like younger.
Yeah, when she would, yeah, exactly. But what I'm getting at with this is that now that she looks at it in a certain way and she's like, oh, these lyrics are a little intense. Do I want to avoid, or it looks a little different? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I was listening to it when I was younger, but it's like, do I want to continue listening to, you know what I mean? Right. Am I getting that correct, Daisy?
Oh, well, are you, I'm sorry, say that again, just so I understand.
Were you less inclined to, when you're saying like you're thinking about what songs you want to play, like say at work or at certain situations, to play certain things because it is a little
I think she
explicit
was saying,
or different?
I think she was more so saying that that like she didn't know that, like, to realize that they were saying that now, and she was like, oh, I have such good memories attached to those because I used to play them, but now I look at them like, oh, this is what they were saying. But I don't know if she was saying she changed her view on them. She was just
well,
saying,
that's my
like,
question. Yeah. Is that changing your view?
Right. So to answer your question, I understand what you're saying now. So it didn't change my view because I think the memory associated to them will always be that. And just in general, that's the music that I gravitate towards. That's kind of like what makes me feel closer to like what I see as that kind of makes me feel closer to like being Mexican. I feel like that is what music wise what I like listening to. I think that the only way that it kind of, I don't want to say it changed my perspective of it, but it did kind of make me question a lot. I still listen to it to clarify. It's still like I will bump that every weekend when I'm barbecuing type of thing. But But as far as like you like I was saying work, I mean, I would probably never play it. Certain songs I would never play, not because they're in Spanish, but just like certain things, like even English music. But the one thing that it did kind of make me question a little bit was, it was interesting because as I got older in college, actually I think it was at TSUMB. No, in college. I don't remember. But I had this professor who, it was kind of like an ethnic studies class, if I'm not mistaken. And he basically started talking shit about like Mexican music. And when I say Mexican music, I mean like banda and corridos and all that stuff, because he was basically saying like, oh, like we hate our, it was like an ethnic studies course, like I said, and it was about like discovering yourself and like Mexican heritage and like minorities and all that good stuff. And he said something like, oh, you guys, as in we, like not only you guys, I think he was Latino as well, but he said like, we listen to that music because we hate ourselves so much. Like you guys want to get all borrachos. For those of you who don't know what borrachos means, drunk, you want to be drunk and blah, blah, blah. And you get drunk to hide away your pain and everything that you're feeling. And you're so ashamed of who you are. So when I heard it that way, honestly, I felt attacked. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I don't drink because I hate myself type of thing. Like my mom doesn't hate herself. Like we don't hate our culture type of thing. So it kind of made me take a step back, and it made me like doubt almost how I chose to identify through music because of that. But in the end, I was just like, whatever. And it hasn't really changed my view on it. I still enjoy it. I still love it. I will always love it. But yeah, to answer your question, it didn't on a personal level, but it did kind of make me doubt it when someone presented it to me a different way. And I low-key hated myself for almost thinking like for a second, like, wait, are they right? You know what I mean? But I feel like I was going through like this discovery process during that time where it's like, I wasn't even sure about like my place in society. I felt like, as a minority, as a woman, I was like, where do I even belong? Like, like there is no place for me type of thing. I kind of was going through this weird place. So I think that's what made me kind of like doubt it almost and question whether it was right that I was listening to it and whether I should even keep listening to it. You know what I mean?
I love it. No, I know exactly what you mean. And I fall in like I feel like in the same boat as you when it comes to trying to appreciate music as for the memories that it has and what it means to me as opposed to what it mean to somebody else. And how you say that kind of, it talks about how you identify yourself through music. And what I was saying is that how it relates to what Wes and I were talking about is because what we've been talking a lot about lately is kind of like a cancel culture associated with music. So because with you, I'm kind of curious, is there certain artists that you stopped listening to as a result of what they've, like maybe allegations or things that have brought up against them? Or like, and not even anything that's like media-wise that's changed your view on an artist, does that stop you from listening to the music?
I feel like I really would have to think about that. I'm gonna go with no, not necessarily. No, I'm gonna go with no. I don't. Well, first of all, I don't really do news, but I think the only person that kind of came to my mind when you were asking the question was probably Lil Wayne. And that's not Spanish. That's not like a cultural. So I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, but I feel like I wasn't really listening to him in general, but I do feel like I kind of okay, I'm lying because I feel like I listened to his new album and I was like, okay, this is tight. But I did kind of like hesitate to like go in there again. So yes and no.
I feel you. For me personally, I fall in like the no range. I try to keep it in the same way where you were saying with like when you realize what the lyrics are about, because for me a lot of it is the same way. Like when I look back at the music that I grew up with, and a lot of the music, the lyrics, I'm like, I don't really associate really with what the lyrics are saying. But does that mean that now I have to stop liking the song? Does that mean that I have to stop associating with it? But for me, I felt like more often than not, that didn't outweigh the memories that I had with the music, and so that allowed me to kind of push forward and continue on being able to enjoy the music. And it kind of falls into the same degree for me with the cancel culture, in the sense of like there's certain artists that they get put into certain spotlights where they're like, yeah, they did some fucked up shit, but does that negate the the separate piece of art. Like, but I understand how people can have a hard time dividing the two, and as a result being able to be against it. But I usually, in my opinion, I feel like it'd be people that are also against like certain songs for the lyrics of it. For the people that are certain, when they see certain things, like, nah, I just don't associate with what that song is about, so I just don't associate myself with it. And so I was kind of curious if you fell in that kind of general category.
I think it's kind of, with this topic, I feel like it's very, for me, it's like I understand it, but I also feel like it's hard to pinpoint, only because like it has to do with like how we associate with the song, and music is subjective within itself, so then therefore taking to how we interpret like our interpretations of the song and our relation to them could kind of be subjective within that, because it's like, so then when I take that, going off of that notion, I kind of feel like I reside personally in the both range, where there's like, yeah, there's people I stopped listening to because of maybe something they did or I found out that like I disagreed with, but I don't necessarily feel like people have to be across the board, where like I'm on a lot of things that I could possibly, on this type of stuff, I could possibly be hypocritical, where there might be someone that is offensive in a different regard that I might enjoy their music. But going to your point, I don't think that negates their musical talent or even like their significance to my like individual memory or my like cultivation and my identity. Because you could be, if I could even take it as deep as people have parents, where it's like, yeah, this parent was involved in this pivotal point in my life, but you know what I mean, like they did something and now I don't really look at them like that. But they're not really gonna take away the part of like, well, they raised me from this point to this point and I wouldn't have learned how to do this or that without them. That's kind of how I look at it with like certain things that have moved me in that way, because that is like what I want to do in life, music. So if somebody I kind of really looked up to and like their song moved me in like a way that changed my like mind or like my life path or something, then I'm always gonna kind of give them that. But that's probably all I'll give them. Like everything else is kind of on you, like face value.
No, and I agree with that. And then, like for me, and I agree with also what you were saying, that it's not about necessarily being all in either direction. Like you can have a sense of like, nah, I can be kind of like, I don't fuck with this person, but I do fuck with this person, because what I was saying is that for me, more often than not, the memories outweigh the other things. And so, what it still comes down to, it's a case-by-case basis. Like there might be a song out there that someone
It depends on how strong the memory is.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like if you heard that at your first car, your graduation, or you heard that, you know, the first time you got your marriage song, that's gonna hold some type of weight with you.
Exactly. But there's
different than, oh, I heard that at my dance. Like
exactly. But if I have no association with a song, and if someone says like, oh, this person does this whatever they do, and I don't agree with what they do, I'm less inclined to listen to. Like, I'm not against saying like, no, I don't want to. I'm not against saying like, no, you don't have to support somebody if you don't like them, because yeah, you don't. You don't have to support everybody. You know what I mean? Like if you don't want to listen to somebody, you don't have to. That's all personal preference. And I'm just saying that for me, more often than not, the memories, just like, if I have a memory associated with it, it'll usually outweigh the other stuff. But if there isn't a memory, I have no problem just kind of walking over certain things, like being like, oh yeah.
Is that whether it's negative or positive memory, Mauricio?
Yes, actually. I think so for me, and this is something like on some like almost like life affirmation situation where I've been trying to accept all emotions. Like even the moments when I'm what can be deemed as like, you know, you're angry, you're sad, like the ones that you kind of try to avoid, I try to avoid. Right. I avoid them, but when they happen, I let them happen in the sense that like, because I don't know how this is on some like deeper like weird kind of like tantrum thing. But what I'm trying to say is like, for me, when it comes to like emotions, right? For me, it feels like a circle. It doesn't feel like a half circle spectrum. It feels like a full circle spectrum, in the sense that you can go so far in one direction that it'll just kind of boost you in the other. So sometimes I feel so sad that once I start realizing that I'm feeling sad and I can feel this emotion, I can almost kind of push myself into happiness, if that makes sense. So that works the same with the music. So if there's a song that, like, there's a lot of songs that have, you know, certain memories attached with them, and they bring up certain memories, and I'm like, this hurts. But it's about taking those moments that hurt and kind of pushing them in the sense, like, letting it hurt but like kind of reworking that hurt into the opposite end of the spectrum, like letting it be helpful, you know what I mean? Let it be healing towards you in a sense. So yeah, I do try to, even if it is a negative memory, sometimes those carry even harder, you know what I mean? Like, well, I guess negative in what sense? Because like maybe it's negative in the sense of like I really had a negative occurrence with a certain artist. Like let's say I had but even then I feel like I can't deny the art, but like it's weird. But you know what I mean? Like it's that's where I feel like it'd maybe be more personal for me, where it kind of like the memories outweighing the art, where like I don't like this artist so much because but I guess that makes sense, because then I'm justifying for whether it makes sense. And I agree with like I was saying, for anybody that wants to cancel somebody, like it's just how much they feel they need to, how much they care. Like for me it has to be like a real personal thing, but sometimes for certain people it doesn't have to be that personal in a sense, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's deep. No, that makes sense. It's crazy to me how I mean, obviously this podcast is about is not strictly about music. We're tying music into the culture and identity aspect of oneself. And it's interesting because I feel like we are giving a lot of, I guess you could say, weight to the feeling of music, or the idea, or the art, I guess, music as an art form. And I mean, this is totally a side note and we don't even have to touch on this, but I just thought about it. Like, I actually know some people that they don't really see music like that. Like, to them, music is not that deep. Like, they genuinely don't really enjoy music to that level. And sometimes I feel like, man, that sucks that you can't even, that you'll never be able to understand that depth that music can reach and how it can shape you. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, that's kind of cool though, I guess, that you'll never associate like pain with a song or happiness with a song. Like, you just don't give it that I guess that time of day, you could say. So I don't know, I just think it's kind of interesting.
And no, actually I really agree with that. And I think I'll touch on that before we even get into like the life affirmations and all that. I feel like the whole we'll speak a little bit on it. What were you talking about again?
I'm just basically saying how like some people don't.
About people that don't feel music. I was gonna say, I've heard it. There's actually like science behind how some people, how like we feel chills when we listen to music, right?
Yeah.
So I realized that like some people don't feel those, and I didn't know that's not like a common thing, because not every song, but like how in certain songs and they get to you and you feel chills. And I started to realize that because they were like, I saw that study, and then I realized that there are people like what you're saying that don't resonate with the music on that level, and really just kind of like, it's strange to me, because it's like I listen to music and it almost always hits me in that way, so I can easily make the connection between how it cultivates parts of your identity and your unique voice, because in those moments it really is giving me like chills to the point where it's like making me feel what they're saying and like relate to it in a surreal way, and that kind of can alter your viewpoint and how you want to go from moving forward. I feel like that is why sometimes for certain people music can hold like a certain extra weight, but I see why for certain people they can only go so far, because they feel like, well, I can understand it, like it gets through the gate, like the barrier of entrance, it just doesn't like reach that deep, you know what I mean? Like,
which I feel like, and I agree with, there's low-key almost no, it's one of those things where like those chills you get from music, there's far things better. There's few things better. Like there, that moment where you're just like, whoa, that just hit like right. You know what I mean? Like, it's amazing. But seeing, and I have seen people that like don't, kind of generally
it's rare.
Listen to a lot of music.
Like, it's rare. Even people have chills really rare, or it's like they only have it once in the blue moon.
But that's really cool. That's a really interesting thought. But I was just kind of saying, like, on the more general sense, like when seeing people that don't necessarily have like a lot of music in their life, usually don't also have like a lot of other forms of art in their life, in my opinion, that I've seen. I see that it kind of it shows like a sense of identity. You know what I mean? It's part of like the person that like they're just a less perhaps artistically inclined, or not inclined, but artistically liking. You know what I mean? Like they're less
I guess if you get into
less
those science of
attracted to like
if you get into those
stuff.
science of left brain and right brain,
Yeah,
that's
you know what I mean?
that's the whole thing behind being more attracted to creativity versus logistical things, because it's the two sides of our brain that work those two parts, and like some people are more inclined, like those parts are more lit up and active than others, and it's not like a negative. It's just because for me, I wish my math ones were a little bit more lit up per se than, but I understand going at what you're saying is like some people, those tones, those receptors aren't as like active for them.
Yeah, and it's like especially for like when you like, I like the fact that you brought like the left brain right brain thing, because even those fall like on a spectrum of like how much of right brain to how much of left brain, you know what I mean? There's like all the way in between. You can be like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like there's a whole bunch of like, it's a spectrum within it, right? But within that, there's, for the people that go like all the way to the ends of seeing like how they don't include art in I don't know, it's weird, because like seeing it from like from an art perspective, like you look at it and it's almost like art in itself, because life is art, like, you know, art is life, you know what I mean? So you know what I mean? Exactly. Just the observation of them and what, like seeing that happen is art in its own. So I guess that is like, they are art in a certain way, but
one side is definitely landed more towards the idea of creativity and art and like the tools it takes to do that, like creating new, like that muscle.
Exactly. It's interesting.
So I was thinking possibly we can get into a little bit of our life affirmation segment. Like I know that takes everybody a little bit of time to think about the thing that, you know, they look at differently than the past 2 weeks or month or week. I've had some time to think about this since this is like the final one, and we're probably going to focus it somewhat on identity and a little bit of like ourselves. So I feel like for me, I think my life affirmation this week is gonna revolve around somewhat of what I think we were talking about earlier, like the reasoning behind people listening to different types of music. I feel like I have a great understanding of that as a far, but I think as it relates to cultivating your identity, I think lately I've been looking at it a whole different way as to like the struggles we go through and the experiences that we have getting to where we want to go, like in our career and dreams, and the adversity we face, and that playing into the kind of music we kind of like are drawn to as consumers and stuff. I feel like I didn't put as much weight to that as before as I once did. I thought people were a lot more open and a lot more maybe bought into like the specific brands and personalities of artists, which they are, but I now see a lot of consumers, and I'm looking at it a little bit more deeper to say that it has to do a lot with our identity and what shaped us. A lot of times that molds us into being like, oh, I want to listen to Sweetie, like she speaks to my background, or I want to listen to like DMX, like he speaks to what I've been through, like, and that is kind of what shapes that. I think, and I didn't always look at it like that. I looked at a lot more factors as maybe weighing more in that conversation, and now I'm realizing that weighs a lot more because it weighed a lot for me in the artists that I chose, because maybe certain adversities I faced, I looked for artists that related to those adversities and overcame that. And I feel like that was kind of the major epiphany I had about, I guess, music and identity in relation to this conversation.
Nice. Daisy?
Yeah. Wait. Oh, that's crazy. That you were saying that, because I feel like that definitely is what attracts like me, for example, to a lot of music that I listen to, or that even that I used to listen to, or maybe I don't listen to as much now. But it's just kind of like people's situation or whatever it is that they're singing, rapping, musically, you know, connecting. It kind of resonates with you and like your similar struggles. And it's interesting because I feel like that's kind of what I guess kind of led me to listen to like a lot of hip hop and rap, because I feel like, you know, there isn't a whole lot of like Mexican rappers or singers, English singers. I don't mean like like, you know, like I said, I listen to Spanish music, but I feel like I was really able to identify with a lot of like hip hop style music because of that, because struggles are so similar, you know what I mean? And it really helped me to kind of like better understand certain things that I was going through at the time that I was going through them. and kind of like get through them, not necessarily understand them, but also get through them. So I feel like I agree with you there that it definitely holds a lot of weight in that sense, and in terms of people's backgrounds and similarities in that. For me though, for like my life affirmation, we're hitting life affirmations, right? Okay. So for my life affirmation, I think that what changed recently for me was more on like your place, and like my place in just in life in general, and how I'm getting there. I feel like I needed to stop comparing myself to others' situation or others' accomplishments or others, place in wherever they found themselves, whether that was academic or professionally. So yeah, I feel like in recent times, and music really helped, I feel like, get me through that, because I was able to just kind of like therapy sessions for myself with just like listening to like like I said earlier, listening to sad music and getting more sad about the situation or whatnot. But then, like Mauricio said, then using that to turn it around and kind of like not force yourself to be happy, but like force yourself to see things from a different perspective as well. So I feel like for me, it was just like that ability, that like not ability, but realizing that I had to stop comparing myself, and that like struggles that I've been through are not defining of who I am, but rather shaping of who I am. That's probably one of the things that changed the most, and I feel like a lot of that has to do with CSUMB and a lot of the courses that I took that really helped me to better understand like my background and my ethnicity and my culture, and just like me as a person. It really just shaped me into I think hopefully a better version of myself. And I feel like it's a discovery process. It's something that obviously has not stopped. And I don't know if it ever will stop. I think that finding yourself is definitely, it's something new every day. So it's definitely a process. And that's kind of what's changed for me.
Very cool. No, that was some very interesting stuff for me personally. I feel like I fall in a similar boat as to what you were saying, is kind of cementing in who you are and kind of like realizing what is it that you want to do, like fine-tuning what it is that you need to do. For me, the big thing that, and it was kind of coincidentally, I didn't realize that when we brushed upon it earlier, like I didn't realize that it was kind of realistically what I was thinking a lot about like this past week, is things of like that nature of not letting like the fact that others around might not be willing to do certain things to hold you back to what you want to achieve. It's about like pushing forward and kind of saying like, nah, fuck, like I can do what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about waiting and seeing like if everyone else is down, everyone raise your hands, yes, no, can we get this done? No, all right, doesn't matter, I'm gonna do it regardless. And so it's trying to reminding myself that, and seeing how I can apply that to further push myself to where I want to be.
Nice.
Well, that was really good too. I feel like that's all very powerful life affirmations and things that we kind of like learn about ourselves as we keep going on this life journey. Before we get into the music, I mean, was there any last words anybody wants to say? Do you want to go over I think we gave a brief info of our songs and the songs that we picked already.
I know did we go over all the songs, or did we just go, because I know we went over at least a couple.
We went over mine and yours. I think I had one more, and then you had, and then I think Daisy had hers.
Well, let's let Daisy start off with hers.
Okay, so for my song, I picked J. Cole's Snow on the Bluff. And I actually picked it because, talking about identity and finding yourself and just like my discovery process, more specifically at CSUMB, I feel like this is when it happened more. I feel like there was a lot of things that I didn't know, or that I felt that I should know. Being a first generation, being Mexican, there was a lot of like cultural aspects or historical aspects that I wasn't really up to speed, I guess you could say. And, Mauricio, I know we were talking a little bit about cancel culture and all that stuff. And I feel like because that's so prominent in our culture at the moment, it really kind of made me feel like fake to a certain extent. Like I felt like I should know a little bit more than I did, or I felt like I wasn't woke enough to even engage in certain conversations or like even know what the hell was going on around my world. And I say that not necessarily with like the whole like Black Lives Matter movement, but just in general, like me as a cultural person, as a Mexican woman. So I feel like this song really kind of like spoke to me in that sense, where it was kind of like I don't want to say that it was okay that I wasn't quote unquote woke, but it's just like everybody kind of like learns things at their own pace, and everybody's kind of like in their own headspace or whatever, or place in their current life. So I feel like just in general, that song always kind of like reaffirms the fact that
it humanized it to an extent. Like it humanized that aspect of like learning and becoming woke.
It humanized, and it gave like my current place like an okay, like it gave the understanding of where I was. So yeah, so that was my song.
Nice.
I'm definitely, so I'll give a little bit of background on my next song. It was Mixtape by Chance the Rapper, and it was definitely on his album. It's his third mixtape, and I feel like that was a pivotal song I chose for me, because at the time when it came out, it was when I was cultivating myself as an artist, like 19, 18, trying to figure out what I wanted to do musically. And really, it was more so of an anthem, at least for independent artists. I think that's what resonated with me at the time, being that I grew up listening to Chance in high school in actual mixtapes, and I saw mixtapes going out of like style and commission. And then as that change actually happened, he released an album with the deal with Apple, which was a streaming service. So it was very significant for me, because it was like the change of the guard almost, because it was like coloring book. And that was a mixtape album, basically, which was like him pushing his foot forward in the mixtape and free music rang to be like, I want this to be legitimized as regular music. And that song kind of was the song on it where he was in the hook saying, I'm the only person that still cares about mixtapes. It was kind of ironic almost, in a sense, to be like someone as mainstream as him kind of like championing a song about being like, no, I still want to make really good free music. So I feel like that's was something that kind of just resonates with me as a person who I became, like someone who wants to make really good, generally free music.
Yeah. Okay. I see that. That's a good song too. Both of those are great songs. I kind of mentioned this part of, we mentioned like the artist a little bit for the second song I was gonna do, which was For the Squaw by Isaiah Rashad. That song just came. It was at my Santa Barbara times. It was when I was walking to and from school every day. Like that song, that whole album, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But that song in particular just kind of it spoke to me melody wise, especially like for me it's always about melody first, and then lyrics second. But both hit me in for that song, and so it was kind of one of those songs that really it helped. It brings me back to that era 100%. That song makes me think of instantly on those walks of Santa Barbara. But the song, the third song, the Confessions by Bad Bad Not Good, or Confessions Part 2, I believe. Yeah. It's that song is just, that's something else, man. That song was introduced to me when I was in high school by a close friend of mine, Connor. We've mentioned him on the show a couple times. But that song, there's certain songs that you know how we talk about the chills, right? That song was one of the ones that like gave me chills the first time I heard it. It just hit me a certain way that I was like, it's relaxing. It gets me in a certain mood, and it gets me in a certain vibe. And it's been a song that's always, that kind of since I've listened to it from that point forward, it always has been that for me. When it comes on, when we're talking about like the playlist, when I'm going through like the shuffle on the playlist, and sometimes I have to skip, if that song comes on, you can't skip. Like that's the situation it is for me. So that song always kind of helps. Or if I'm thinking of like, ooh, what's a good song to kind of just put me in the mood of like, kind of like centered. I don't need to be too hype. I don't need to be too calmed down. You know what I mean? I just kind of need to be chill, like, like just chill. Like that song, it does it for me. That kind of helps center me. So that song was that was my last one. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for joining us, Stacey. I know this was the second time we had to do this, we had a little technical difficulties the first time around, but I'm really thankful that you were able to rock with us this second time.
No, well, thank you guys for having me. Like I said, for creating the space, it's appreciated, and it was a pleasure.
And yes, thank you for having us. I'm glad you had a good time here. It was really fun sharing like our views on our opinions and on the world and how we came to be ourselves through our individual perspectives and how our cultures shaped us. I just wanted to leave on a closing note with one question that Mauricio kind of provoked me with at one point in time in our kind of working of this podcast and making the last one, where it says, is art priceless or the emotion that it evokes? We don't have to say too much on it, but I figured that was a good question to maybe like just say a little on and like leave.
Okay, I like this. I fuck with it. I like it. But sorry, Daisy, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking.
Okay.
I think that it's definitely the emotions that it evokes. No doubt about it. I feel like because art is so subjective, just in general, like whether that be musical or like painting, like that kind of art is just in general is very subjective. But definitely, it's the emotion that is associated to it that gives it the power that it gives it.
For me, I would say that I think art is priceless, but I think art can be priceless, right? But the emotion that it evokes can almost be rendered as even more unattainable, like ungraspable. So that I feel like can almost be deemed as priceless in itself, because how can you put a price tag on something that is you can't really grasp? You know what I mean? Like the feeling that the art gives you, I can't hold that feeling in my hand. It's something that is intangible. So I feel like it's hard to price it, which goes different than priceless in the notion of just being like, oh, we don't know what to price this yet. It's more so like, I don't know if there ever will be a moment to price this.
I think sorry, go ahead, Daisy.
Oh no, I was just gonna finish off. I feel like the emotion gives the art the price, which is
that's exactly what I was gonna say, word for word. It is. I think in that statement, yeah, the emotion is priceless, because the art is just gonna change. The price will based off that emotion.
That makes sense. So it builds it. The emotion that it evokes builds it to that point.
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right. Well,
this was a good episode. Thank you again for joining us.
Of course, thank you all for having me.
Mind Tree Radio.
Visions of the future shot. Yeah, but I don't know if I'm alive or I'm dead. I could really give a fuck. I'm an enemy. I rest on the part. Understand when I'm only coming down. Like I can't say, so then I feel like that. Like really priceless. Like down. Cause I've been on the red half all my years, and I've been thinking all this time. Don't get saucy around my day, but I'm still in the flow in the boat. I can't see the find my way about this. But I know I can't doubt this. Purpose is higher. Niggas have you ever have a lot of confidence in your why? Hey, damn, but now it's like now it's like
Mind Tree Radio.